people out there. Thursday again. I've missed a couple of Thursdays last week because I was on earlier in the week, and the week before because I was on holidays, but we're back to the normal schedule now, if a little bit later. I had a meeting this morning. Hang on, let me move this down a slight bit. I had a meeting when I was meant to be on here, so I'm just 1 hour later, but it probably suits anyone who's over in the US because you're a little bit later into the day. So thank you for coming and joining me. Hey, I'm seeing everyone's faces pop up there. Thank you all very much for coming and joining me. If you have any questions for me, post them up in the comments. I'm happy to answer as I go through, if I can answer them or if we have the time. Whether it's about the pattern I'm going to talk about, or yarn, or club, or anything at all. You've bought soft trails with the emerald. Excellent. I will talk a little bit more with people about what she is talking about there, the pattern soft trails. It was actually someone in YouTube, in one of the YouTube comments, where I was wearing this sweater and I said I didn't have a name for it yet, threw up the idea of soft trails. So if that was you, give me a shout out because I would like to gift you the pattern. I will pop into YouTube and see if I can get in contact with the person who gave me the suggestion for the name, because it was one of those ones where when I sat with it, I'm like, that actually sounds like a really fitting name for the pattern. So Monica, you're waiting to decide on colors. Well, if you want to see any of them up closer, I've got them all sitting behind me here, so I'm happy to pull them up on camera, and I might do that as well in a second as we're going through. For anyone who wants to be able to get a little close and personal with the colors, I'll pull them down off the shelf. So if you're all sitting here looking at me wondering, what are you talking about? What's soft trails? It's the new pattern that I've just released today. Feels like a really long time since I've released a pattern. I know it's not that long, but because a lot of them have been either in clubs or the reknits of previous patterns, it has been a few months since there's been a brand new pattern. So this is one that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. And I didn't have time to knit it myself, but a really good sample knitter, Amy down in Waterford, did the knitting for me. And actually she loved it so much that she wanted to keep the rest of the yarn and knit a sample for herself. So, you know, that's not a good advertisement for the sweater, I don't know what is, because it's a nice feeling sweater because it's light and it's airy and it's perfect for in between seasons. We're not quite there in Ireland yet, and anywhere that's got a warmer climate, you're probably not there yet, but it means that you've got a couple of months where you get to knit the sweater, and it'll be just in time for that kind of trans-seasonal stage, or for indoor weather where it's not so cold in the winter or the autumn months as well. So I think the name let me pull it in front. This is Soft Trails here. And you can see why I like the idea of Soft Trails as a name, because the lace pattern running up and down the side, it does feel like a soft trail. So it fit really nicely with the sweater design. It's knit in Bloss Delight, and I'll talk to you a little bit later about the actual yarn. But right now I'll just tell you the basic makeup of it. It's woolen spun and it is single ply, so it means that it's a very, very lightweight, delicate feeling yarn, and when you knit that up into a sweater, it gives you this really, really just a light, almost airy feeling, similar to, you know, if you've got when you knit shawls and you block them quite aggressively, that real light, fluffy feel to it. It's got that feel to it, but it's not knit as loosely as a shawl, obviously. And I think it's just the combination of woolen spun, which holds a lot of air, and the single ply, which just blooms quite a lot when you've actually gone ahead and you're knitting with it. So the sweater, it starts from the top. It's top down and it's seamless. It's got a drop shoulder construction. Let me pull it out here. It's drop shoulder. So you start across the back here, and you've got small little bit of short rows, and then from there it's knit straight down to the back of the armhole, and then you come back and you pick up the front, do a little bit of shaping here to shape the front of the neck, and also the short rows, and then you knit straight down. So really the only thing that is in any way complicated is right at the start. There's a couple of short rows, and they're done, they are done across the lace, but they're done where you turn with a complete lace repeat. So it doesn't make it very complicated. And it's done in German short rows, which are quite straightforward to work. So that's the only complicated bit in it. After that, you knit straight down, you join in the round for the body, and for the sleeves, they're knit from the top down. You pick up stitches around the armhole and you knit from the top down. And down across the bottom here is where you get the decreases for the underarm. You can probably see as well here that the sleeves are a little bit shorter. They end about here on me, about 3/4 length, but because it's top down, you can change it really easily. You keep knitting a little bit further when you reach that point and add a couple of extra decreases. So not very complicated. If you haven't knit with this yarn before, there's actually huge yardage in it. So this particular sweater only took 2 skeins of Blostolite, which is kind of insane. And even the largest sizes, you're still only talking about 4 skeins. So if you're in the bracket where it's 2 skeins, if you're on the first couple of sizes there, you should have enough where if you wanted to lengthen the sweater or if you wanted to lengthen the sleeves, you'll have sufficient yarn for that. Now, if you're at the point where you can see the next size up moves into the next skein of yarn, you may want to get an extra skein to be able to, if you intend on making it a little bit bigger. So in terms of wearing this sweater, it's got a few things going on. The first thing, because I wanted it very simple to knit, so just straight down and without any body shaping, but I also wanted it very easy to wear and take advantage of the fact that it's a really floaty fabric. Floaty fabrics, you can go oversized without having a huge volume of fabric or weight kind of hanging around you. So that's what I went with this. I've got it designed so it's got a lot of positive ease. So what that means is you're going to want to add for this, like you'll have a to fit size. So for instance, a 30-inch bust to fit means that when you measure yourself, you're only 30 inches around. And then you're going to want to look at a size that's about 37 to 40 inch in the finished size. So the sweater is going to be 7 to 10 inches bigger than your actual bust size. And what that actually does is it allows a little bit of floatiness, but it shouldn't feel really swimming in it because the fabric is very light. Now, the second thing you do when you're working with oversized, hey Nan, how are you? I think we've got Vesna is there too as well. Thank you for joining me, people. So if you've got your body oversized, sometimes you also want to compensate a little bit to make sure that you don't feel like you're swimming in it. So you've got a light fabric, which you've got. Second thing you want to do is a little bit cropped or not as long as you'd usually go also works so that you don't have extra weight of fabric. And the third thing is you want to keep the sleeves nice and fitted. So that means that if you're looking at the sizings, and so for something that is to fit kind of the 32 inch bust size, will actually have this dimension 40 inches, giving you all that extra ease, but the sleeves will be fitted relatively snugly so that by the time you come down here, it'll fit you properly and it won't be oversized. And that will mean that the whole thing won't feel like you've borrowed somebody's sweater that's too big, because the extremities will fit you and the sweater itself is a little bit bigger. And you can adjust all of these things if you want. If you want to up the sleeve size, just knit this a little bit deeper. If you want a longer sleeve, you can go ahead and just keep knitting as you're going, adding a couple of more decreases. Hey, from Maine, you like the designs in Blosta. Thank you very much. So speaking of Blosta, we're actually going to go on to take a look at the different colors now. We've got, hey, Judy from Newfoundland. Thank you. You've managed to jump in even though I'm an hour later than usual. Hopefully that works out a little bit easier for you rather than more difficult. So I was talking about Blosta and the nature of Blostolite. So I'm going to pull, this is actually the brack, which is what it's knit in. I'm going to hold it up here close. Can you see here it's very woolly and it's a single ply. There's only one fairly lightly twisted ply of yarn. So woolen spun is again where when it's carded, it's not all carded so that the fibers lie in the same direction, which means that when it's spun, then it's going to trap a little bit of air. That makes it much, much lighter. It's not going to be quite as strong as a worsted spun, because it means that with the worsted spun, with everything being pulled in one direction, it's going to be a little bit stronger, but it is lighter. Now, because it's not as strong, when you're working with it, if you pull too hard, it can crack. You can use a felted join. In the end product, the knitting itself is giving you a bit of cohesiveness, so it's actually not going to it's going to work just fine. It doesn't feel fragile. You don't have to be extra careful with it or anything like that. But as you're knitting it, you do have to kind of watch that you don't pull too hard. Cindy, you wanted to know what size needles you're using. 3.75 millimeter, which I think is a size 6. Someone might double check on that, but in millimeters is 3.75 is the size of the needle. Also with the yarn, most of them have got this heathered look, and that's because all of the fleece is dyed first of all, blended together, and then it's spun, which gives this really nice heathered look. So this is Barak, which is the one that is dyed same as this. If you want something a little bit brighter, this is Or, which is the Irish for gold. So let me hold it up here so you can see this is a little bit more of a solid color, but it's this lovely, lovely goldy mustardy color. Where are we? Up here. Pull a few more out. If you want something that's a little more neutral, it's US 5. Thank you very much. So the 3.75 millimeter is a US size 5. Should really have all of those translations in my head, but I still sometimes get them mixed up. So this is Leah, which is the Irish for grey. So we're having an Irish lesson here today as well, people. So this has got a little bit less heathering in it, but there's still some lighter and darker sections, as you can see through the yarn. So that is, if you want something that can kind of go with everything and is a little bit more neutral, I think that's a good one. This one here is Farraga. And Farraga is actually the Irish for sea, which I think is really fitting. Anyone who has been to an Irish sea or the seaside or the beach in Ireland, you will know that this is pretty much always through the winter what the colour of the sea looks like. It's this deep, deep grey with little hints of other darker colours and lighter colours running through it. So this is also quite similar to the Barak colour in the sense that it's got a very, very it's got a super amount of heathering in it. So Barak and the Farraga are going to be the two ones that you'll get the most feathery and tonal and tweedy effects, whereas the others are a little bit more solid and the grey somewhere in between. I think that is all my, yes, oh wait, the one thing I haven't pulled down here is our emerald. Emerald green again, and also a little bit more solid. There's a small little bit of variation, but it is a super green. So if you are a fan of green, this may be the one for you. So that one is emerald. So that's all of the different colors that we've got available in the Bloss to Light. If you've used the standard Blosta, which it's part of the Celtic Knits Club, that one is a 2-ply version of the Bloss to Light, and then the Bloss to Light is a single ply. So sometimes it's a little bit wavy because when you've got a single ply, it doesn't have the second ply to twist around, so it can sometimes twist and wave a small bit more. How is it for sensitive skin? It's an Irish rustic yarn. It's not as rough as a lot of Irish yarns, but it's not going to be super soft. So if you're very sensitive, you'd need to wear something underneath it. It's not going to be, for most people, it probably wouldn't necessarily be next to skin. I just wear a long sleeve t-shirt underneath it, and it's okay for me then at that point. Nan, you love the colors. Good, thank you. But yeah, I definitely, if you've got very sensitive skin, you do want to put something in underneath it. It does, as with most Irish yarns, it definitely softens with washing, but like initially it's going to take 1 or 2 washes as you're going through. And obviously it is not super wash. You need to hand wash this. If there's any more questions there, and hang on, Claudia from Knit Yarn and Fibre Studio in Georgia. Hey, how are you doing? And there's somebody just posted up here saying that it blocks beautifully. Yes, that's one thing I haven't actually talked enough about, is It's one of the most amazing things about woolen spun yarn, and even more so a single ply woolen spun yarn. When you block it, it just goes poof. I mean, that's the best way to put it, is it can look a little bit weedy or a little bit like the stitches aren't totally even, or there's gaps in it as you're knitting up, and you're looking at it and you just think it's a total disaster. And then when you actually block it, it just soaks in the moisture and it fills all the stitches in. And it is the most amazing thing about woolen spun. There's a couple of questions here. What weight is Blostelite? Blostelite is actually close to a fingering weight. So by using a 3.75 needle, we're working it at a very loose gauge, which is why it adds to the whole lightness of it. But and from the yardage, you can actually kind of see that, because it's got an awful lot of yardage, partially because it's woolen spun, because it's lighter, so that it doesn't weigh as much for the same yardage, but also it's just, we're knitting it a little bit more loosely, because the blocking means that it will bloom and it fills in the stitches. If you're a little dubious about it when you're working up, I would really, really recommend blocking your gauge swatch the way you're going to finish it off, and wet blocking is really imperative because it needs water to fill it out. There's another question here. All the colors are awesome and you couldn't decide which one you prefer. The C one maybe. I love the C one as well. I feel like both Farraga and Farraga have got quite a bit of depth of color in them. If I wanted something kind of more neutral, I'd probably go for Leah. And then if like the other thing for the emerald and the ore, these two, where are we here? This one and the ore. These two here, if you've got dresses or tops or outfits that tend to veer towards grays and blacks and neutrals, a sweater in one of these would be just fantastic, because it's just going to really bring a whole pop of color to your whole wardrobe, I think. And I think you could even, if you wanted to experiment, you could probably even go from one color to another as well. Okay, Pat, you were wondering, if you're tall, would you add length in the yoke and the body to balance the extra length? You don't want to add length in the yoke if you're not intending on increasing the sleeve size, because the yoke length is just, you're knitting straight to here and in just going flat on the back and the front. And that is specifically to accommodate the size of your upper arm. So if you don't want to increase the size of your upper arm, then you want the extra length to be in the body. Because of course with drop shoulder, these are going to be sitting out here as well. So it's kind of all the one, and the yoke, or the upper body, I've really referred to it as, because I'm not sure it's even properly a yoke as such, but the upper body part is specifically there and open to accommodate the sleeve diameter. So that's something to bear in mind as well. If you want to increase or decrease the sleeve size, then you want to go increase and decrease the length of this opening to match the sleeve size afterwards as well. I'm going to see, was there more questions here? What did you name the new sweater? It's called Soft Trails. And in fact, it was somebody on YouTube suggested it. So I thought it was a really nice name. And I need to find that person and send them a message, because I want to gift them the pattern to thank them for the name suggestions. Because when I was wearing it the last time, I got some great suggestions for names, because it didn't have a name yet. And so there were several people were saying, oh, it makes me think of this and this. So it was really, really helpful, because naming things is incredibly difficult. Is the pattern on my website? Yes, it is on the website, just under Soft Trails. There's the kit, the yarn kit and Blostelite there as well. And if you want the two of them, if you put them into the cart together, you'll get an automatic discount of 5% because it creates a bundle. You can take it off if you don't want that, if you're using another discount code, but you have it automatically will pop that discount in if you put the two in. I think I've answered the rest of the questions that are down there. Again, if you've got anything else that you want to ask me in relation to it, just pop up a question there. There was also a couple of other kind of questions and comments and things came in over the week in Instagram Live. We had a couple of posts that had a huge amount of comments on them, and I kind of replied to some, but I didn't get around to all of them because there was quite a few of them on there. So I thought I might kind of even open it up a discussion here and just talk a small bit about what we were talking about. And one more question there. Drop shoulder. Yes, it is. It's drop shoulders, and it's designed to be oversized as well, so that it's it floats on the body is the way it's designed, because even in the photographs, if you pop in and look, I've got about 9 inches of ease, and I don't think it looks or feels like 9 inches of ease. It just works really well being oversized because of the fabric being so light and fluffy is the way I put it. All right, so one of our questions was in relation to the blanket, the Shasker blanket. Oh, someone's asking, will the video be available later? Yes, it will. I'll put it up on IGTV, and I'll also pop it up on, and I'll pop it on YouTube as well later this evening. Claudine, you'd like to see the sweater again? By all means, here we go. Here's the sweater. Let me pull it back. Top down with just a simple vertical lace along each side. And I'm not wearing it because it's often easier to talk about details when it's on something next to me. It was, oh, you're the one who suggested the name. No, I think it was just one person. Send me on a message, will you? Because I'd like to gift you the pattern. I loved the name. It was just perfect. Elsa Louise, I'm a great model for, oh, thank you. It felt like my kind of sweater. It felt very comfortable. I'm kind of veering towards oversized sweaters these days because I tend to wear like dresses, often even more fitted dresses, or like long tank tops and things, and loose, shorter sweaters seems to work really well with that. So they've very much become the kind of sweaters that I'm veering towards. Even if I'm in a shop looking for stuff, it's what I end up looking for. So it's very wearable, and because it's top down and there isn't shaping, if you do have a longer torso, you can easily add a little extra length, try it on as you're going and things like that. So you've got a lot of flexibility to be able to adjust it to your body size because of the fact that the details are kept very simple, so the modifications are easy, you know. It doesn't look like it has that much ease. I know it doesn't. That's the amazing thing, is that when I was putting it down and the realization that it really doesn't look like it has much ease as it has. So that was, yeah, it does allow for extra ease for sure. So I was going to pull my Shasker blanket over here. And what we were asking during the week on the grid was, I was asking people when they finished this blanket off, were they going to hang it as wall art or on display somewhere, or is it just purely going to be to keep them cozy and warm? And we had some huge variations in answers. But my favorite, I think, has to be people saying both. Display it on the wall when you're not using it, but have it close enough that you can pull it down and keep yourself warm with it. And I actually think that's the perfect solution, because it's like the best of both worlds, that you get to see it in all its glory and people walking in can admire your handiwork, but it does its functional job, which is what a blanket is there for. It's there to keep you warm and cozy, and all the rest of it. So this is just the message again there from my namer. Is your name Versna? Is that, because I'm not sure, because your tagline is quite long, so I'm not sure what your actual name is. But she has found me now, the person who has named it. The other thing that we were talking about on the grid was needle types and needle sets. So you know, when you buy a set of needles, often they'll come in a nice bag and it'll have a range. Vesna, very good, I've got the name right. It'll come in a range of sizes. Often you might go buy the smaller set, which will come from maybe a 3 up to a 5 or a 5.5, or the larger size, or perhaps a really deluxe one of all of them. And we were asking how many sets of needles people had, and the answer varied enormously, but then it all merged into this whole discussion about why you would want more than one set of needles. And I realized that there were actually a lot of reasons to have more than one set of needles, because you might use a lot of double pointed needles, in which case that's one whole set by itself. You might like some projects where you prefer to have metal, others that you prefer to have wood, and so the two of them means that you end up with a couple of variations. And the one thing that I haven't done it yet, but I think I may go and put something together which is a a kind of a favorites compilation. So like if you're like me, there's usually going to be a couple of different needle sizes used all the time. In my case, it tends to be 3.5, 3.75, 4 and 4.5. Those needle sizes are about 95% of my projects. It just seems to be the way it works out. Part of it is the yarn that I've got, but that's my sweet spot when it comes to needle sizes. And so I'd love a set where you had just the sizes you want, but you had all the types of needle, where you had ones where wooden ones, pointy ones, blunt ones, metal ones, shorter needles, very short little one, double pointed, and just kind of, well, probably not every possible needle, but a large range of types of needles, but just a really limited sizing. I just think that would actually be really nice. Maybe next Christmas I'll gather stuff together and put one of those out, but it just seems like a useful thing to have out there when you're only using a small set of needles. Carbons needles, yeah, they're actually a big favorite. They kind of, you've got a little combination of the two favorites. You've got a little bit of stickiness of the carbons, and then you've also got the point of the metal, because that's one of the biggest disadvantages of wood, is that after a while the points tend to get a little less pointy, and sometimes I suspect actually you can probably smooth them off, but I'd be afraid of destroying them if I did that, if there was any kind of a coating or a wax on the outside. So I'm a little bit scared of destroying my needles with doing that. But I do find that wood can sometimes end up basically wearing out, because if you're using the same sizes over and over again, you just go through those needle sizes. So yeah, I think many in your favorite sizes is the way to go for me, with just one of the outer limits that you only use occasionally, and then a ton of those few sizes that you know you're going to keep using. So yeah, the perfect needle size. Riverview Knitting, a good idea for Christmas. That's what I was thinking, right? If you kind of say, it's like, I want to get my favorite needle sizes and I want them in everything. It's yeah, it would be a great Christmas gift for someone, particularly if you knew the kind of yarns they always knit with, which is just going to come with the relatively small range of needle sizes. So it makes sense. Anyway, all right, well, that's probably a more verbose overview of my grid than you were expecting in my chat today. But I think the sun's shining again today, and I'm feeling extra chatty today. So I hope you enjoyed our live today, and if there's any questions that pop up that weren't answered here, or you have after the fact, just pop them in. Oh, you think the cable is the most important part? It needs to be flexible. I'm completely with you. Yes, yeah. And I think a lot of needle types have started moving in that direction. They've gotten much more flexible cables, because when circulars came in, first of all, the cables were dreadful. They were plastic and stiff and you couldn't bend them. But then as they started progressing, almost all needles styles now I'm finding are moving towards super flexible soft needles. And one of the nice things about the Haya, and I know other brands do it, like the signature ones, the base twist, so it makes it even more flexible. There's a question there from Jane: is Barak blue or more of a periwinkle? To me, it is a blue. It is a blue, but the different flecks of I'll put it in closer here. The different flecks of colors running through it can mean that at different lights it can sometimes look slightly different colors. So it is a blue, but the tweedy stuff definitely veers it in different directions depending on where you're looking at it. So hopefully that helps, Jane. All right, I will definitely for real say goodbye this time. Shannon was talking about it today, Irish goodbyes, and she calls it an Irish goodbye when her father just disappears without saying goodbye. In my case, an Irish goodbye, which my father used to be a king of, was a bye now, bye on the phone. And it would be about 10 byes before he'd actually go. So yeah, if you hear anyone do that, it's very Irish. Very old man Irish is the best way to put it. So bye now from everyone.